Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 107. Noel Diaz of Purity Wine and I grabbed a little time before the recent By the Way Festival to get some of his thoughts about the current natural wine industry, selling wine, some of the bright spots, and the challenges. A few of the themes discussed are similar to what we talked about in the recent Andrew Sullivan episode, but from a small producer perspective. The Purity space has acted as an incubator and collective to many small projects, and the By the Way Festival holds a special place in my heart because that's where the very first recording for the podcast took place, so it always feels great to be back there. Noel was also the first guest on the podcast, so if you want to know the full story, you can always hop on back to episode 2. A reminder that I have a Patreon at patreon.com/indiewinepodcast. A link is in the show notes also. If you're enjoying the podcast, any amount to help me keep telling wine stories ad-free and available for everyone is appreciated. It's all run independently, much like the producers I talk with. Telling a friend or sharing on social media are great ways to help out too. Here we go.
I guess challenges and just kind of where the natural wine community is sort of sitting right now,
where
kind
we
of,
are, and
where we find ourselves. Is that
well, I'm optimistic about the future.
okay?
One of the things that happened when I got into the business was I was a dreamer, and I thought I was fascinated by what natural wine symbolized to me, which was kind of a response to industrialized wine, was for the most part, plus also just thinking about organic farming and I came into it like that, and I don't want to say I was naive because I came into it with a lot of experience in terms of being a wine buyer, I was a floor somm at a restaurant. I worked with wine. I probably started reading about wine when I was about 20, something like that.
And I think you're kind of experienced with some of the European natural wines and
Yeah,
the wines that have been
Yeah, well, I tell people that all the
produced
time.
previously.
I came up through classic, whether we call it classic or conventional. It's always difficult for me to counter what natural is with what the other is, and I knew that was going to happen. I think he'll stop. Okay, it's my son on the drums there. So I came up through let's say classic wine, and I found natural wine. I didn't go. I wasn't a some kind of I was never really a hippie. I grew up in farm country, and I kind of tell people I come from the land, but I also wanted to get out of farm country as I could and get an education and then pursue something else. But I was kind of drawn back, and it kind of called me back. And when I got into the business, I thought, this is great. We can have these little small operations, and it can be handwork, and but then you get into the details of making the numbers work. And that's I started a natural wine school last year, partly because so we have a collective here of all natural winemakers, and there are minor exceptions in case I get called out. I have let some people make wine who I'd struggle with, who very small, who maybe will filter. We don't filter. I've never filtered. But so we have this collective, and part of the way the collective came about was to, one, build community, and two, help to pay the rent. This is a very expensive place that we make wine in Richmond. And so it was both.
Yeah.
But what started happening, I put the kind of the signal out, the word out that if you wanted to come and make wine on a small scale, that this place, and I don't like to say my wife and I set this place up. I came up with the kind of this utopian idea of a collective, but I always wanted the responsibility of making it work to be on the shoulders of the members of the collective, of the community, which hasn't always been the easiest thing to do. But so people would come in and they'd say, I want to make wine. And I would say, okay, and they liked my wines, or they heard of the place and they wanted to make natural wine. So that was very simple. And I would just say, okay, here are the criteria. Here's what you pay for, and here's what you get. And that was all the way from going all the way through licensing, which is the key thing that most people who want to start something are concerned with. And it's not a significant hurdle. So people would come in, and I would kind of leave them be. And then they would learn how to make wine on the internet. And what I find about the internet, and I'm all for, I'm a big tech person. I love where we're at, and I've always been a part of it. But I also like handwork in terms of how we make wine here. But I would find that one of the things with doing searches is you don't necessarily get a three-dimensional view of what's going to happen. And I started to see that Fresno State wasn't teaching it. I think at San Luis Obispo, they weren't teaching it. And Davis certainly wasn't teaching natural wine. They would cursorily talk about this thing that exists, but they wouldn't talk about how you make it. I think partly because it wasn't legitimized. Again, it's thought of as a bunch of basically hippies making wine. But so they came in and they would search things like, what is carbonic maceration? They'd say, I want to do this, but they wouldn't really know exactly kind of the chemistry and the science behind it. And I'm not a huge science person, but I do go and I spend time researching in a little more broad sense. I talk to other winemakers. I am self-taught. And I'm sure I went through a lot of this in the learning curve, making mistakes and making natural wine. I've worked with people who made conventional wine or classic wine, and they have the same problems we do. They have things. There's this one thing called ropiness, which is where the wine is like, it turns to something like okra. It's gummy, or I don't want to say maple syrup, because maple syrup is, think positive. If I say it's like okra juice, then people are gonna, and that's kind of what it's like. You end up with something that's just gummy.
I've only read about it. I've never experienced it in real life, and
yeah,
I hope not to.
It's definitely, and it can go away, but it's just like those things like that happen, or Brettanomyces, or volatility, and why volatility happens. And so we started here in 2017. I started making wine in 2013. We moved to Richmond in 2017 as the co-op. After the first year, it turned into a collective. And then it pretty much took me until about after we came out of COVID is when people would want to come in. I had difficulty. I didn't want to step on their toes. I didn't want to crush their spirits and this kind of idealism. But on the other hand, I would start to get kind of snappy with them, because I would say, like, you have part of it. You have part of the information, but this is the other thing that can happen. And then you end up with this what we call like a freshman success, and it's your first year out. For some reason, almost 100% of the time, you're going to make a really good wine. And then you go into it the second year saying to yourself, well, it was really cool. The wine did make itself, and that wasn't hard. And then you start to increase your production, because you're just like, okay, now I'm ready to hit the ground running. And then nature smacks you in the back of the head. And so at some point I thought, well, maybe rather than having these relationships with people where I had difficulty in, we're peers, they pay me to provide a service, and it's hard for me to start telling them, you don't know what you're doing and you should just stop and let's talk about it. But then it occurred to me, maybe I would start a wine school that then we could lead into people getting a foundation, and really me sharing with them the kind of like everything. I mean, we talk about marketing, we talk about volatility, we talk about the best way to finish a ferment. So that's these are kind of, I want to get back to what the topic was, which is the state of the kind of the natural wine industry. I think I continue to be optimistic. We're seeing a definite a ground shift, and I think part of it is still us coming out of COVID. Part of it is this generational shift. The younger people aren't drinking what their parents drank, and I think there's a bit of a trickle down. There's also an anti-alcohol movement that
Yeah,
is very subversive, and it comes from that. What was the austere? I forget the term that you use, where just people don't think you should really take pleasure in living.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Not ascetic, but
Yeah,
there is like
okay.
they're puritanical. That's what it is. I think
Okay,
because it is
okay.
a lot of times seen as a vice,
Sure.
and so we're going through changes, but also I think that the realities of the business are very. It's like I tell people that the numbers don't lie. You can come in and you can be a dreamer, but at the end of the day, if you put in $1, you need to get $1.20 back. Otherwise, if you're getting 90 cents back, you're going to run out of money. And that's kind of one of the harder things too, to kind of understand and to make work.
Have you seen that change much? Not that you need to get money back. Of course, you need to make money. It's business. But have you seen the complexity of that change in like 2013 to 2026? Almost 15 years.
The complexity.
Or I guess the difficulty maybe in it.
I think I came to terms with it
Okay.
more than anything, with
Okay.
how concrete it is. It's very simple in terms of the way the economics work. You buy fruit, that costs you a certain amount of money. Let's say that costs you. I won't even start bringing up numbers because I'm going to get bogged down. But let's say you buy fruit, then you've got to turn that into wine. And let's say it doesn't spoil. You actually make a wine you can sell. Then you have to just add some kind of markup. One of the cool things about California is that we are allowed to sell. I can sell direct. I don't need a distributor to sell for me. But what distributors have is they have networks. But distributors if I'm going to a store, let's say I'm going to Ordinaire and I'm going to sell them some wine. Generally, if I sell them a bottle of wine at $10, they're going to put it on the shelf at something like $16 or so, $16, $17, something like that. If I go through a distributor, that $10 that I would get, I now can only get $6. So now with something like, let's say, a retail like Ordinaire, I'm going to get 6. It's going to be on the shelf for 16. And these are small numbers, but you can extrapolate the meaning. So in working with a distributor, you take a big hit. And the idea is, and then you start playing with these. And this is interesting because, again, being a small hand-produced, we don't have employees. I've kept the operation small enough, and at times it's really stressed me out. There are times when I could use help, and I don't like to take free help. That's another thing that I have trouble with is people who start small and they everybody has their own reasoning, but I have a hard time accepting free work. So we don't ever ask for that. We don't go for it. There are times when people will ask if they can help out, and I always definitely try to at least share education with them, and they leave with wine if I can't give them money. But so you kind of you come into it and you say, okay, all I have to do is I'm going to make wine. That's going to be great and fun, and then I'll figure out how to sell it. Really, you should probably figure out how to sell it first and then learn how to make wine. And I tell people all the time, like, you just always have to be figuring out what the sale is going to be and where it's going to be. And so it hasn't gotten easier. It hasn't gotten harder. It's always just been. If anything that's gotten a little trickier is that possibly, I think one of the things that is happening or did happen, I suppose, to natural wine is there's maybe a little more of a critical eye on natural wine. But like I tell people all the time too, it's a critical eye when the eye wants to be critical. Because there are people that I'll sell wine to and they'll turn to look at me and they'll say, oh, it's a little fragile, meaning it's got something in there that seems to be it's going to go off the rails. And then I'll go buy a natural wine from a cool natural wine shop, and it's a really, really cool natural wine maker. I pop it open and it's fragile. So it kind of, and I also, like, one of the other things too is that I keep beating this drum, and Matt, you and I talked about it briefly on the phone. We were talking about having a conversation. I had wanted to come on here with another winemaker who went out of business recently, and I wanted to talk about the struggles and just kind of exactly what we're talking about now. But the idea of that we have this culturally, we have this obsession with the imports, and that I think is the biggest thing that hurts the local producers, the domestic, I'm going to keep it limited to California because that's where I am, but the California producers, those of us who, like, I farm organically. I don't have a huge vineyard. I've been doing that since when I could get back in, and that was important for me. I can't farm everything that I produce, so I buy fruit as well. But I'm always trying to find a grower that I think has noble intentions. You know, I can't say like a great this or great that, but just somebody that I think, okay, this is a person of the land and they care about the land. So we have these stories that we don't get to tell a lot of times because the importers create stories. I mean, if you look at somebody who I still love and I think did a great service to artisan winemaking is Kermit Lynch.
Sure.
And a great book. I highly recommend it. Wine, something.
Adventures on the Wine Route.
Yeah. But he has this way of weaving a beautiful romantic story. It's, to me, like when I read his books or what he writes, it's like kind of like reading Hemingway, being like going fishing and going into a little bar and getting a satchel of wine, and there's a beauty to it.
Yeah, it's very evocative. It makes you want to be nowhere else but a cave in the Rhone.
It is, and we're always taught. Even if you think about like the tasting of the late '70s tasting between France and California, and there's always this thing of like the comparing to a higher standard. And I've said this over 20 years ago. I had a friend who was a distributor in California, and he was a good friend, and I said, if we don't focus on our culture, we're never going to develop culture. And when I say that, I mean not just an overall umbrella culture, but like cultures of regionality also. Looking at like the Sierra foothills, there's 100 miles from south to north. That just, you can't, 100 miles doesn't allow you to, and I'm not one to jump in and talk about terroir. I think it's a little esoteric and a little hard for most people to understand, but people do understand, hey, I want a Sonoma Pinot Noir, or I want a Lodi Zinfandel, or there is truth to that. And if we had a little more interest in what we were doing as opposed to a fascination of what the import, or what I like to call the other, is doing, that I think would be a significant help. And
yeah, sometimes I think it's easy to maybe kind of overlook what's right next to you a little bit. This is like something that you see every day. It's easy to kind of take it for granted. And then I kind of have a issue with a lot of the wine lists that tend to be like more French focused, like very little California, especially when local is like one of the calling cards for the restaurant. Like, you know, everything sourced within 25 miles for fruits and vegetables. The grain we have milled by this guy over here, and the beef comes from this ranch 100 miles away. And it's like, yeah, we got a lot of French wines, and you know, maybe at one point there wasn't a California wine to fit every niche, but I mean, if you want a light rosé, a heavy rosé, a light red, acidic light white wine, or more full-bodied white wine, like you can find, like we could name a lot of producers that could fill any of these niches making good wine. So I think with restaurants that sort of angle towards that local scene with everything else, feels kind of incongruent to have largely European.
It is. It's disingenuous. It also, because it's, how can you talk about exactly what you said? I can talk about the tomato that you got 20 miles down the road, and the wine has to be European. And maybe it would be a little more acceptable if we got the same shelf space there that they get here, but that doesn't happen and nobody questions it. That's something that again, if we want to have a culture, we have to support the culture. And I haven't seen anyone. There was a company that's still around called Revel. That's owned by a friend of mine who did and does. I think they now have some imports, but they did really focus on California. It was kind of like the new California. But there's nobody out there who's bringing attention to what we're doing in terms of like farming and natural wine and what that is. There's no distributor out there that's focused on that. Mostly, you find yourself in a book that you is dominated by imports. So I would say, like, when just talking about the industry and what's coming or I don't know. I am trying to start. We have a couple of licenses. We have a winemaker license, and we also have a bar license. I can sell to people. I can buy wine and I can sell people. I can sell direct to people in a kind of a direct to consumer form. And I've been talking about it for years of really trying to leverage that and bring attention and kind of run around and kind of I have this idea of like being a California Kermit Lynch or going out and doing something like Action Bronson, just going out and getting shit-faced drunk with a winemaker and recording everything and having something over a grill and I don't know, probably burning my hand. But at the end of the day, like showing that we're all just like that we don't have. It's hand to mouth in terms of staying in business, and you're seeing like people are starting to fall off.
Yeah.
Maybe there were too many. I think that there's just if we had a little more shelf space, we'd be able to do that. And I kind of like the part of the thing of this collective is that I tell people all the time like it's probably a good idea to keep the day job until you can actually see a foundation on that runway. It's going to take you time, and you have to be patient, and it's hard to get that across to people. I mean, I have numerous winemakers here who have a lot of wine that they're going to have to figure out what to do with because they love the process, but they don't like the act of selling. And that's kind of some of the things that, like I wanted to also talk about is like, what do you do for that? I mean, one of the things that we do, or some of the things, we've created a collective, and that does help us pay the bills.
Yeah.
We have the bar, we have a feeble wine club that I really am going to work on. But that's another, we have an event, we created events, but when we got to this warehouse, people said, oh, you can have events here. And I'd never thought about it. But then other people started saying, can I have my birthday here? Can I have my wedding here? And I was like, okay, that's generating a little more revenue to keep the lights on. And then selling wine. And during COVID, we pivoted and we did direct consumer, and people were, the community really, really kept us afloat. We did relatively well during COVID. I mean, a lot of people did because people were stockpiling, wine in there.
Yeah, everybody's funds kind of got like reallocated from vacations and things like that.
So there was
stay at home and
we didn't
and drink
and drink and they also had their pods, their little groups. Remember that? And we had we used to sell cases, and we gave a special price, and people started influencing their pods, and other people, though their friends would come at us, and that was really cool, and that really felt like community. I mean, I was in the forest to see the trees. I didn't realize a lot of people were going through this. There was just a lot of wine being bought. So when we came out of COVID, it was like it just dried up, and then the political scene kind of changed in terms of alcohol, which also didn't help. The absurdity of the whole dry January, just pace yourself, people. It's hard for me not to make any sales in January. I still got to pay my January rent. I'm gonna stop complaining about that. But
no, I agree with the sentiment though, as far as pace yourself. How does the podcast kind of started up, by the way, which I'm sure you realize, but like how does that fit into selling wine and kind of creating more of a community or getting consumers interested?
How does By the Way?
Yeah.
Okay, so By the Way came about because Brumaire had their Ordinaire had Brumaire, which was a fair that they would sell out in minutes, and people would say to me, I can't even get tickets. I don't know how to get tickets. Like, they go on sale and they're already sold out. And I think, and Bradford also has talked to me about, like, that was kind of a mixed blessing because he was like, we don't. They didn't know the solution either. They're like, we put them out and just let the chips fall. And I had said to him at some point, I said, why don't we do an off room air where we can have some of the winemakers and it's just where people can get tickets and it's accessible and they can kind of feel like they're a part of it. And he was cool with that and he said sure, and he said and we'll give you a little bump on our email. And so over time we've kind of networked. So one of the things about the collective is if you make wine here, you are always welcome to pour at By the Way. We then, and usually now we'll end up having something like maybe 15 or so of our collective winemakers that'll usually be able to make it. The other thing is that then we'll bring in around 10 or so. My partner, my wife, Barry, she doesn't want us to have 40 or 50 winemakers, because one of the other things that I think is really cool about what we do here is all the winemakers get to sell wine direct. So if you walk up to a winemaker and you taste their wine and you like their story and you want to buy it, you can buy it right there from them and support them directly. We don't take a cut of that. We do sell tickets and we do get revenue, but we also pay for music. We pay for other things. But that does help us out. We do make money at the end of the day of that. And this year we lowered our prices a little bit because we just really wanted it to be accessible. I want people to come in and I want people to support the winemakers.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes too, I know a good number of people and I'll go walk around and I'll want to basically give people some FaceTime and I'll forget to pour wine. And then Barry will come at me and she'll go, people come here and they like your wine, they like our wine, they like us, and you're doing them a disservice by not pouring. So I try not to compete with the other winemakers because I feel in a way guilty because I don't want to have my hand in all the money kind of thing. I don't want to. It's like if they make sales and I don't make sales, we at least got the ticket sales. Yeah. But she's right. I do need to be here for our community in that way. Not to make myself sound any greater than I already think I am. But so I like that, and I like that. Again, this program that I want to do, where I want to go out and I want to take video. I want to go out with a winemaker, and it's important that I go out with a winemaker that I want to go talk to other winemakers, and I want to record it. I want to record both the spirit, the joviality, and the intensity, the passion, and I want to use the bar as kind of a conduit to make the connection of saying this is what somebody's doing out in Frenchtown Farms, for example. This is what somebody's doing out in some little town in Cambria. This is what somebody's doing in San Diego. Let's go look. I want to be able to show that. That's what By the Way was for also. Just to be camaraderie and to kind of share the struggle a little bit, but also to share the celebration. I hope it doesn't sound packaged. It doesn't. I don't mean it to be.
Been rehearsing it.
I have not been rehearsing. I mean, I have because I tell the same story over and over again. So that's what By the Way is for. And again, it's all, I don't want to be blind to the fact that we're also trying to stay in business. And if I sit there and go, how can I bring in another dollar? That's one of the things I tell people, you got to think about sales all the time, forever, always. And you're always selling. It doesn't matter. If you're pouring somebody wine, you're selling wine. That's what I mean by it's concrete. It is black and white.
I want to ask you a question about the distribution. I've heard a few other winemakers mention it. The struggle with growing to maybe get into distribution channels and those wines being sent to, say, Ohio or Nevada, New York, where have you, versus staying at a smaller level and making less wine, but maybe concentrating more on local sales and kind of that struggle that they've gone through. Do you have any kind of experience with with that? It's something I hear over and over from people that struggle, and if they feel like they're doing the right thing by growing and distributing wine far and making much less per bottle in a lot of cases.
There's a scandal going on right now with Southern Wine, and that is there's this stuff called pay to play. I was a wine buyer at a hotel, and I got promoted from being just the de facto wine buyer to actually becoming the wine buyer. And when that technicality happened, Southern sat me down, and these were friends of mine, and they're friends because they're really, really, really good at selling and socializing. The two working hand in hand in this business. And they sat me down and they said, we have commitments and we want to make sure that you're not going to change this. And I didn't realize it, but they were muscling me. And I was this small fry, never threatened to change things around. But they wanted to make sure that the $10,000 that they contributed in various forms, I won't say money, I didn't see that, but we would get menus, we would get bonuses, we would get like gifts. And that would, I don't want to like, this was 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
But it is happening and it is in the news today.
Yeah.
So that's just the tip of that. I'll get into distribution. You're gonna have to bring me back down once I get started. But the other thing is DTC, direct to consumer, is the holy grail. Everybody wants it. Not everybody can have it. Can't. It's just it's impossible. So people will talk about like, I'm going to start my brand, I'm going to be small, and I'm going to go DTC. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but you're still going to hustle for that. You're going to hustle for any sale. You've got a lot of competition. And if you look at right now, like Sonoma and Napa in particular, they've really kind of priced themselves out in this economy, in this, whatever that means. What I'm saying is that the tasting rooms in Napa are struggling. Well, when you do a tasting of 4 wines and it's not even ends up being the equivalent of a glass of wine, maybe a little bit more than a glass, and it's $80, not everybody has that money. And so eventually the well just starts to come up empty. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think that's a great idea. Distributors, I do not like distributors. I have had and worked with distributors. I have never not ended up disappointed with them. Even there's a couple that have been good. One guy came to us, I can't remember how met us, but was cool with this collective and took some wines down to Korea and then dipped out and ghosted us at some point. Didn't at least say, hey, we're having a hard time selling the wines. Nothing, no feedback that we could say, is there something wrong? It's just that, and then a lot of the distributors are fly by night. Then there is there's the percentage of cut that you have to give up. So what a lot of winemakers, I might want to name names, but then I don't feel like I can because they're not here. But I can just say, let's say ABC winemaker decided, okay, I am going to scale. And because if I'm going to be making a dime rather than 50 cents on every transaction, then I need to make that much more. And then I tell people too, people will hire somebody. I'm like, how do you afford to pay? You hire somebody as a full-time, let's say winemaker, assistant to the winemaker, something like that. Yeah. That's a minimum of around $80,000 to $100,000 for a full-time person. Like by the time all the fees, all the expenses, that has to come out of that comes out of the bottom. Mm-hmm. That you would otherwise give to yourself. You just have to, but it's talking about what you were saying. Maybe your scale isn't going to support the market isn't going to support your scale to be able to make enough money to make a living on. If you keep it small, then you're going to constantly have to network. And it's I know I'll put it this way. There's a winemaker that I know that built a little retail wine shop, and one thing led to another and ended up $130,000 in debt and a tiny little retail space that just couldn't sustain that kind of debt. And that was another burden. When you think of like, I'll open up a shop and we have community and they will support. And you do hope that, but you still have to constantly grind through it to make those connections. So distribution, you're giving up half. They're fickle. They're really, really fickle. And they go for low-hanging fruit. That is a fact. I am cordial to distributors. I don't like them. And I just think that the business model doesn't work. I kind of suspect, I don't have proof of this. I kind of suspect distributors, if they can make their numbers work, which is then they've got to be sophisticated. I think they make money. The small little niche distributors, I doubt they're making any money. So, but they are they are taking a cut of what we could keep. If I could sell, and and then we talk about gatekeepers, and then there's a lot of, again, we talk about this obsession for the import. So if I go to someplace, let's say I go to LA and I work the market, if people don't already know me, it's really, really hard for me to knock on the door. And I've done it. Sometimes you get just dismissed. And you look at the shelves and you're like, I know these other winemakers, and why don't you give me, what do I have to do to get there? That's a whole nother skill set too. I don't know if I answered the question, but I would say that distribution, it doesn't, I don't see distribution solving problems the way that I want to make wine at the scale that I want to make. And I know another winemaker who said, okay, fine, I'm going to scale. And I'm going to become, he himself is quoted in the paper as saying, I was the largest natural wine producer in the country. And then what happened was there was a shift. He was leveraged, and he couldn't handle the shift in the who was buying. So yeah, you produce a lot of, and you have to, and it's a 3-year kind of thing where you produce a wine this year to sell 2 years later or 3 years later, and if the market shifts, what do you do? How do you scramble to sell that wine that you then? It's a beast. It's like a beast that you have to keep feeding.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of people having kind of like standing orders canceled also as soon as like, yeah, things kind of shift a little bit and like, oh, natural wine isn't as hot in our market now, so like that pallet is not going to Ohio
It's just
or
sitting
wherever,
Yeah.
you know.
And they'll say we want money back. Give us. I forget, there's a term for it in the industry, but so they want to lower the price. So then they want a credit. Jared from Donkey Goat one time told me, he said, don't ever send a pallet out to a distributor who hasn't paid for the pallet that they already got. Because once they have 2 pallets, now they own you. Now they're going to start telling you how you're going to price, what you're going to make. And you have to really be careful about that. I hope I don't get Jared in trouble. I didn't mean to do that. But I just thought it was a really good piece of advice that I've kept with me for, 10, 12 years. That kind of figuring out the scale, figuring out the shifts, what you do when the market does shift, how you keep up with it. And that's, if you don't have money, which most of us making natural wine don't, there's few if any that I know who are actually like well funded. That doesn't really exist.
Have you seen any shift in like maybe the winemaking, either as like these kind of taste change or people trying to figure out their space, kind of either people moving maybe either like more kind of radical to on the edge or erring slightly more towards conventional as they try to find
natural winemaker?
conservative. Well, and maybe it's not as natural as it once
term.
was. Yeah,
I'm a conservative natural winemaker.
Yeah, I guess. Have you seen that at all as a way that people have dealt with?
All right, so
with that,
yeah, I think it is definitely. Let's just talk about wines that are on the wild side. And early on in California natural, and I think natural did definitely hit a quality like we call a fad. So I do think that that brought in a lot of just kind of like devil may care. I'm gonna just do this. The wine's gonna make itself, and whatever happens, way that things fall is where they're gonna fall, and we're gonna support that. And so there was there was that, and I think we've kind of maybe dial that back. But also we were experimenting. We were like, there's nobody teaching us how to make natural wine. There really isn't. I don't have a mentor. When I first started, I went to Gideon Closer on, and I said, hey, how do you do this? How's this? How's that? And he was very generous, and he told me. He didn't break my heart, which I appreciate. He didn't tell me don't do this. He said go for it, But he said there's a few simple things that you have to worry about, and that was an oversimplification to now that I see. But so there was like a gung ho quality, and we were just like, let's just go. Let's just kind of like it's juice, and a lot of people still like that stuff. But then there's also like. You have a lot of times people won't tell you. You get people who come up in a classic way. The buyers I'm talking about come up in a classic way. At first, sure, they're jumping on, but then maybe they get tired of things that are a little funky or volatile, or mouse became the big thing. And I agree. Like a little bit of mouse, I'm not going to trip over. When it becomes mouse soup, I don't like that either. And I agree that there are times, but a lot of times you'll open up a tank. The wine tastes great. You put it in a bottle, and you may have commitments. You put it into a bottle, and then it changes because we're not filtering it. We're not adding. If we are adding sulfur, it's not enough. That's really going to keep it fully stable. Along those lines, like you were talking about, like people who have commitments, and then what you do when the commitments change. I got I knew the regional wine buyer of Whole Foods, Melanie. I consider her a good friend, and she became friends because she liked what I do. She liked my story, and we connected. She liked my wines, and she got me into Whole Foods, and I didn't realize it. I didn't realize the gift that she gave me. What happened was there was an order that came in and it was $50,000 order. And basically, I was selling two small containers of their puncheons. So it was like, I don't know, 100 cases, I think. $50,000 order. The math doesn't work out that way because I don't remember. It must have been it must have been a little more wine or a little bit less money. But it worked out to where I was selling them wine at something like $12 a bottle. But I feel like it was a $50,000 order. So I took it, I fulfilled it. I ended up like it was just me in a truck. I didn't want to spend money to get a trucking company. I just told Mel, I said, how do I get it to the Whole Foods distribution center? She's like, here, this is what you do. And it was even that I kind of like I'm probably irritating her, but I was like, I'm doing this. This is me. It's handwork. It's just like me the farmer showing up with his stuff.
Yeah.
And I get out to Whole Foods. The wine sells like crazy. The wine landed really good. It was a Barbera. And then they kept putting in reorders. Well, I ran out of Barbera and I lost that fruit source. So I had some Cabernet, but I wanted somebody to taste with me. But the store buyers don't taste with you. So eventually I gave that account up. It wasn't that they weren't buying from me. I just realized that I couldn't make it work. I was going to have to. I didn't know suddenly because Melanie got promoted into something else. I think she's like the, I don't know, import buyer or the entire for the country or something like that. So I didn't want to lean on her. I don't really like asking for, give me a special favor. So that one was difficult too, but I had to reconcile it with, and that's kind of what happens. What you find happening is you start these things. Like right now, I have a really good account, and they'll come at me and they'll put a 20-case order in, and then we do these little collabs where I start making things for them, and we'll slap their label on it. And I really like these people, and I like doing this. And I go pour, and I talk to their community, and they're supportive of us. But they might change their taste and they might move on, and you have to be ready for that. Yeah. I've had other accounts, great accounts. I have an account in LA and in San Francisco that I'm trying to get them back. And then what happens is, I tell people this too, is if you find the hot place that's opening and you happen to meet the buyer and he likes you because he's a genuine person and he's a good person, and then you sell, and then they are everybody wants to dance. Everybody's going to go there. And when you have distribution, they will muscle you out. I mean, it's not, I don't want to just talk more shit about distributors, but it's just the nature of the game. They're sharks, and they're going to get in there and they're going to push you out. And then you got to find a new resource.
Right. It becomes like, hey, look, you can buy everything from us. You don't have to deal with Noel driving his car over there, dropping off cases. And
there are times too that we'll see things where we think people copy us on certain things, and I'm like, well, I heard about doing this from somebody else too. So and Barry sometimes she'll be like, they're doing that same thing we're doing, and I'm like, well, I mean, we all want to make a sale. How can you hate on people? We're all hustling here. So in terms of my, it's not that I don't want to just sit here and bitch about distributors, but I will. So you're just always kind of trying to make it work, and sometimes these things shift, and when they shift, you have to give yourself a little bit of extra lead. We've been fortunate in that the numbers have kind of worked. We're not getting wealthy. I can't sell the company. If I sell the company, nobody's going to give me anything. Maybe I sell some equipment, but I'll sell it for fire sale prices. Nothing. And even now we're on our second lease right now. We have 5-year leases. The leases add up to about $500,000 over the course of the lease. We're coming into next year, our lease is up. I'm going to start negotiating the lease now because I want to know what I have to look forward to. And we may have to find another place to make wine. I don't want to. I want to stay here. But it's effectively $12,000 a month for this place. So I don't sell $12,000 a month in wine.
Yeah, I know the event is, or I know you probably have more work to do.
It's time
for by the way here. So I don't need to keep you too much longer, but I wanted to ask you about any bright spots that you might be seeing, if there are some, which I really hope that there
Yeah,
are.
there are the people who are coming to this fair and who keep coming to the fair. We do it twice a year. We're gonna have I think somewhere around 300 people come and support us today. That's really really important. When people reach out to us, if you go to on our website right now, you have to email us and ask us, hey, I want to get some wine from you. Not because I want to make people work, but because I want to engage with people. I hate click through. I really don't like. I hate going on to somebody's wine website and it's like you want to sign up for our newsletter. If you want to sign up for a newsletter, I engage with people on a personal level.
Yeah.
The people who have been buying from us and who just every couple of months say, hey, can I get another case of wine? I really appreciate that. The bright spot is that there are people who want to support us. They don't really understand our struggle because we're always talking about having a good time. So I would like to bring some of that to light. Again, like I said, part of me talking to you about saying this, about this, like this new venture that I'm kind of taking on. It's not a new venture. It's just like really focusing myself and making this venture work. Is that if I start telling enough people I'm going to do it, then eventually I have to do it. It's going to take a lot of work. But like if I could say, like I kind of was telling my wife the other day, I want to be the Kermit Lynch of California. Like I know that sounds corny, but it's true. Like I want to be that like roguish guy who goes out there and just has a lot of fun and swims in the river and can tell the stories and share them. And I want to share them in the form of videos. And I want people to then support those winemakers. And I'm even trying to figure out how, and I don't want to say this as I'm making it up, but I'm even trying to figure out how to get the winemakers a price that they don't have to like struggle to get into a club type price, which usually ends up not very generous, but then also trying to cut back whatever I'm making in terms of my markup. Like how do I told Bear, I'm like, I'm going to try something where I pay the winemaker 20 and then I just add $5 on a bottle. And then that's enough that I think if I sell enough bottles that I can pay for gas and it can help us pay the rent. But it's bringing attention to us and talking about how wonderful this state is, how great these artisan products are. It's all families doing it. And you can feel it. I'm sure you can tell in my tone that I'm optimistic about. I love what I do. I really, really, I went to school. I was always searching for something, and I found it. And I'm really happy that I got here. My kids ask me, they'll like think about what they're gonna do and I'm like, I don't care what you do. Like, don't worry about money. Just worry about like at the end of your life, like thinking, fuck, I got the chance to do that. So there, I'll stop rambling. But thank you for the opportunity, Matt. Really, I think what you're doing is great. I really love the pod. I've listened to all of them.
Okay,
and I love having you come out and join us, by the way.
Yeah, always love being here. Oh. Cool.
Excellent. Okay. All right.
Glad you made it work. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm out of here. Peace.
Thanks for listening today. Noel has been an instrumental part of the Bay Area natural wine community for nearly a decade. It always feels good to grab a few minutes with him before an event like By the Way and see what's on his mind. You can follow Noel, Barry, and Purity at Purity Wine on Instagram. Please follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. You can email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com or Instagram with comments, questions, or feedback. And if you enjoyed the podcast, I'd love it if you told a friend or wine lover about it and help spread the word. It really helps a lot. And rating, reviewing, or donating at patreon.com/indiewinepodcast helps a lot too. It all goes to offsetting podcast expenses, keeps it ad-free, available for everyone, allows for more episodes, and helps support independent folks. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.